Hello everyone, and thank you very much for being here this afternoon. It is really exciting to be able to share this project with you. It's a little bit intimidating to be talking to this many people after the last 2 years, so I'm hoping just to feel the love and not stumble too much. We've got a really exciting project to tell you about. In 2021, we delivered a digital multimedia immersive experience in the dry dock that surrounds the SS Great Britain. For us, this was a really big experiment in storytelling. And as everybody in this room appreciates, it was carried out under circumstances of unique challenge. So we're going to tell you a bit about how we used new media and a new creative approach to achieve audience engagement as we all started to come out of lockdown and try to find out what the world looked like now. Just to start off, a few introductions. I'm Kate, and I'm the Head of Interpretation at the SS Great Britain Trust. This is Thom Buttery, who is co-director of Limbic Cinema, which is a big noise in Bristol. And this is Saili, Katebe, who we are honoured to call one of our first poet in residence. And he joined us in 2019 through the Boat Poets scheme. And then we loved him so much that we asked him back for a second residency in early 2021. And that was part of the genesis of this project. I can't bring the ship here to introduce her to you. You'll see a little bit of her in the video that I'm about to show, but I think it's just important to explain a little bit of what visitors normally encounter when they come to visit SS Great Britain. She is a ship launched in 1843 from Bristol, and she is now conserved in the dry dock which was constructed in order to build her. When she was built, she was the biggest ship in the world, and there was no facility large enough to create a ship of that size. So the dry dock was built in order to create a space where you could build the biggest ship in the world. And that's why visitors see her now. So when you arrive on site, coming to see the ship, the first thing you do is to walk past her on the dockside, but then you descend down a staircase into the dry dock where you're right up close to the hull of this incredible iron ship that sailed around the world's oceans. I'm going to now show you a quick video which will give you a little bit of a sense of what the ship and the space looked like during the Iron Island installation. And then we're going to do a bit of a tag team. Thom will talk first about the digital magic that Limbic created for us. Then Saili is going to talk about what was really special about this project as a co-creation process. And then I'll follow up with some insights into what we learned through this project. So you can sit back and have a bit of afternoon telly now. Here it comes.
When the wind is up, where you came from can feel like a distant constellation.
So we're in the dry dock where this amazing ship was built. But of course she wasn't built for an environment like this. She was built to go out and sail across the world. And the project that we've just delivered, Iron Island, is really about bringing the sea back to the ship. And I think this project really started with, it didn't start with the technology, it started with the story. And that story then created the opportunity to bring in amazing collaborators and to ask them to contribute their ideas and their talent and their insights to making that story come alive.
The main thing that we were trying to create was the sense of journey. Firstly, kind of for the ship itself, we wanted to evoke the feeling that that was moving and travelling, and then secondly, for the audience to feel like they were going somewhere and trying to evoke the feeling of leaving somewhere that you feel very comfortable with and at home with, to venturing into the unknown.
When we were working with Iron Island, there were so many stories we could have told. I think the ship is a rich source of history, story, and just human experiences and lived experiences. So we had to find a point to anchor everything in. And innovation and migration and the way those two work together with the birth and the first voyages of SS Great Britain became the key points to stick with. When we're talking about migration, or when we're making those leaps from known spaces to unknown spaces, it might not always be a physical move, but the feeling is the same. And we're trying to narrow down what that feels like, because I think it's something that everybody sort of experiences in one way or another.
So we are using 5 projectors, projecting on kind of 360 surround. So one screen is facing forward and then the other 2 screens on the side, in the hope that the audience being the centre of that feel like the water is moving beside them and that they're actually kind of travelling.
We wanted the way that we told this story to be relevant and accessible to as wide an audience as possible. Bristol's a really diverse city, and we're always looking for ways to engage as wide a cross-section of the Bristol community as we possibly can. We also have visitors coming to us under normal circumstances from all across the world, and the ship's story is their story too. This is a ship that represents, in some ways, the whole global history of migration. It's not a history lesson, it's an experience. For audiences, we could see from day one that this was really delivering. We've had people in tears down here.
Our iron island cuts across the globe to where the albatross live, where the water holds its independence, where the great cartographers of time and legacy lean into the future. We are a rolling archipelago drifting across the sea, contemplating the perennial question, what should you sacrifice today for a better tomorrow?
Thank you. Tom, you're on.
Hello, hello, hello. So my role on this project was as a creative director, and that basically meant being responsible for various kind of multimedia elements. So taking our experience from working in theatre and thinking about how the light, the sound, and the projection, and the animation, and the space all kind of tie together in a way that gives space to each of those disciplines or medias. And one of the challenges with the SS Great Britain is obviously the dry dock itself is not a theatre space. So we had to do a lot of thinking around how to bring all the equipment in. The projectors are pretty substantial. And also the space, it was a rolling installation, so people needed to experience it in the daytime. So there was quite a lot of thought about how to black it out as well, because there's a glass ceiling which is covered in water, which made it quite challenging. Once we got that infrastructure in place, you've then got to consider things about sort of general considerations around storytelling in 360. So it's quite easy to kind of overload people if you have too much visual information going on all around them. And so in this instance, the story starts in a kind of kelp forest, which represents home, and it provided this kind of entry for audiences where they felt comfortable and they didn't feel overwhelmed. And then we went into a storm section where we did actually overwhelm them quite significantly. But that was the intention. And yeah, I guess another thing that really helped was spatial sound design and thinking about how to guide the audience's view around the space so that they're not just focusing on one area. And so we did this using original music and diegetic sounds that relate to the things that are going on in the scenes. And so we might have something like fish or an animal that passes from one side of the dry dock across the caisson around to the other side, and the sound would follow that so that it kind of encouraged people to sort of look around and feel present in the space. And then one of the other things is obviously making sure that we gave a lot of attention to the ship itself and brought that to focus. And the way that we did that was by taking lots of photographs of it and creating a digital model. And then we were able to simulate water crashing against the bow. And it's a textured model, so it has the actual paneling and the actual textures of the paint from the ship, and the water reflects off all of its dimples and all of its kind of crevices. And from this, we were able to create content which is then projection mapped onto the bow, and this creates quite a striking visual, which gives the ship the kind of attention it deserves, I guess, in the space. And this is made in Cinema 4D software. So, but yeah, I think that hopefully gives a good idea of how it's made. And this diagram just shows you how it's set up and how some of the projection mapping works. So in our software, we have a camera set up on the left and on the right, and we were able to capture what it would look like for water to actually hit against the hull and then reproject it onto the hull in the dry dock. Thank you.
Hiya. My name is Saili, and as it says on the screen, I'm poet in residence. So my role was somewhat not as entertaining, but I had so much fun in the process, which is one of the things that made this project a pleasure to work on. My contribution to Iron Island started in 2019, part of the Boats Poets Residency and Africa Eye Festival. I served 1 week of that residency, spending time in the Brunel Institute, interacting with the ship and having conversations with the team. During that time, I was picking apart all the different stories and all the different information that was available to me then. And there's two moments during that time that really stood out for me. One of which was a Visit the Artist Day, where I had a chance to sit down with visitors who came to see the ship and have a bit of a question and answer. A few other people who came to visit are people who visited the site regularly, but we did have some people who hadn't visited the site much, and that was very telling to the relationship between place and the actual space that we were taking up. The other moment that really sparked a lot of ideas for me was my interaction with Joanna, who's a team in the Brunel Institute. Listening to Joanna speak about the history of the ship, her expertise on maritime, and in the back of my head, the creativity was piecing things together. I was already filled with people's interaction with the ship, and now connecting that to the academia, I was able to connect dots that otherwise I wouldn't have been able to see. Now, I was given carte blanche in the Brunel Institute to some degree to root through, read books, read through journals. And for me, personally, it was exciting, and the relationship we developed brought me back to the ship for another residency and also to celebrate an anniversary of the ship. And for me, the relationships that we were building between the ship, the community, and the team really solidified how we moved forward with Iron Island. I'm sure a lot of conversations you've been having today have been about storytelling. Storytelling is a tale as old as time. It's something we've done before literacy and before academia was an avenue through which we explored the world. And storytelling has a very simple formula. You have an objective, there's an obstacle, and you find a resolution to that. And life is a wave of this, constantly moving through an obstacle. If we look at this project as an example, the first objective that we had is we wanted to tell a story. We wanted to be brave about communicating and connecting the ship to the community in ways that haven't been done before. What was the obstacles? Where do we start? How do we do it? Because the ship has so many stories and so many opportunities to work through, and we didn't have the privilege or the opportunity to create something long-term, so we whittled things out. What did the ship represent? And how does it connect to where we are now? This ship was an innovative marvel. It opened up migration in new ways. The way we interacted with the maritime changed, and the way people interacted with the world changed. But there's so many things to talk about there, but one thing that really solidified itself through all the conversation was the way humans navigate obstacles. Innovation is a way to do that. Stories are a way to look into how we do that, and part of my creative process wasn't only in the conversations that I had with the academics and the team on the site, but the conversations I was having with the team I was working with. Everybody was committed to the vision, and I think we almost had to tame the way I would have loved to sort of throw all the academia at you. Oh, this happened, that happened, and focus in on the human experience. How do you distill that moment? And a few of the images and motifs that feature in this poem were actually excerpts from the team's lives. I love to play creative games, and I was walking through and asking for moments that related to experiences people could have shared in this. I would have gone all over the shop if it wasn't for the help of Thom. I think when you're working in something that's so new in innovative ways, it was very nice to be able to trust each other in the process, to explore the possibilities in new mediums and new ways of collaborating. What is possible with this immersive process? How do we use sound? How is language going to be relevant to the space and the people who live around it? And I think the point of view that we narrowed down was we're on this journey together. This is innovation as a concept in what we created. We're celebrating innovation of the ship, of our travel through maritime, and we try to really give each other a front row seat to this. And I hope that the rest of the team enjoyed it as much as I did, and I'm looking forward to different ways that the ship and the team move forward in being able to tell the stories of the ship and continue to explore and test the boundaries of collaboration. Thank you.
So as Saili suggested, this is a project that we really want to build on, and in lots of different respects. It's useful at this kind of point in the project to think about what our original objectives were and how well we achieved them. We saw on the ground lots of enjoyment, lots of reaction, lots of experience going on, and we've done our best to try and measure and capture that and see how well we achieved our objectives. And I wanted to tell you a little bit now about that element of the project. So we set out with some clear objectives to support and catalyse emotional engagement with the ship. And I think that was a very new kind of objective for us. We've thought about sensory and immersive engagement in the past, and we've thought about intellectual engagement. But what we felt was a real opportunity here was to just make a connection from the heart for people coming into the space and encountering the ship for the first time. We wanted to drive visitation, especially from an arts and culture audience who were looking for a new experience and something exciting and releasing as we all came out of lockdown. We wanted as an organisation to learn about working with digital media to create immersive story. And also, very importantly, we wanted to explore the potential of collaborative working with creative partners. So we had these clear objectives before us as we set out on the project. And I'm very happy to say that we managed to deliver on all of those objectives. We carried out a post-visit survey, which gave us an unambiguously strong response from our audience. The majority of the responses were very clearly positive, demonstrated clear impact, showed that we were achieving emotional engagement, but also showing that the kind of immersive content that we developed was also delivering intellectual engagement. And that was a really, that gave us a lot of confidence in in the story that we'd told. We managed to support strong visitation towards the end of the school holidays as the cultural and heritage sector started to come out of lockdown. And that was quite an emotional experience for us to see lots of people coming back to this thing that we had really carefully crafted during the months of lockdown to welcome them back to the site. We also explored the impact that this offer had had on people's motivation to visit. And we found that about 10% of the 20,000 people who saw it had come specifically for Iron Island. So that's given us a sense that this kind of very ambitious multimedia production is really worth investing in. It does drive visitation, as well as achieving really strong outcomes for the people who see it. So there's lots and lots for us to feel good about here. I mentioned a couple of other objectives. One of them was about our learning to use immersive multimedia and learning and experimenting with creativity in that kind of world. And one was about collaboration with new kinds of creative partners and new kinds of collaboration. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about both of those approaches as well. This is my high-risk slide, just coming up now. I thought very carefully about whether to show this to you. This is one of the comments we got back from our post-visit audience survey. And of course, we've thought quite carefully about this. Was it really a health and safety nightmare? So a little bit of audience participation here. How many reported incidents do you think we had from the 20,000 visitors who saw this over a 6-week period? There's a right answer. None. So we had 0 incidents. Nobody slipped, nobody fell, nobody fainted, nobody overheated. It was a risky environment, but we managed the risk. There was a lot of careful preparation put into achieving that. Our ops team, our tech team, our lighting installation team, our staff presence throughout the period of the installation all helped us to achieve that. But we did see in our survey outcomes a really clear perception among a minority of the audience that the experience was unsafe. We know it wasn't. We know we didn't have any accidents. But we started to think a bit more about what was going on and why people were perceiving it in that way. And I think there are 2 possibilities. One is that there were some access challenges. We were taking people into a nearly 200-year-old space. The floor is uneven, the lighting is low, and we did work hard to try to make the access as good as it possibly could be. But that is definitely an area where we can work harder when we deliver this kind of project again. Obviously, in the context of lockdown, we had very limited opportunity to work with focus groups or with audience groups who might have been able to support our thinking about what we could do to make the experience as accessible as possible. And that was a clear disadvantage for us when thinking about that element of delivery. The other thing that's possibly a bigger challenge for getting right in the future, is calibrating an immersive experience. We really wanted to go to town with this. We wanted a storm. We wanted jellyfish. We wanted to make immersion really rich. We wanted to make this an offer that would wow people. And in the course of achieving that, we delivered something that actually some of the audience found completely overwhelming. And I think there's now a lot of, we've got some more thinking to do about how to make sure we deliver immersion that is satisfying and enriching and surprising and tells a powerful story, but at the same time can be inclusive and can tell a story for people who maybe need it to be a little bit more gentle. I suppose where I've got to at the minute is thinking maybe immersion isn't one size fits all. And when we're designing this kind of content in the future, we've got to be more nuanced, and we've got to think about bringing different audiences through the storytelling in a way that's comfortable for them. Whoops. The final thing that I want to say before I hand back to Saili is the other really big and new objective for us was experimenting with a new kind of creative practice. This is a picture of us in the dry dock before we put Iron Island in. We're all working hard here. Saili's having one of those creative conversations he was talking about with my colleague Natalie. And this is one of the other Toms from Limbic, who is talking to Joe Atchison, the composer who created the soundscape for the project. What I want this picture to illustrate is that Iron Island saw us engaging in a quite different kind of creative process from the standard sort of brief plus consultant norm that we've used in the past very successfully. This project was special partly because of COVID and because of successive lockdowns and the changes that we all had to make in response to those lockdowns. That created a context where actually the relationship between us as creative partners had a lot of time to develop, and we had to work through change together, and we had to build a lot of confidence, a lot of trust between us. And we had to learn to listen to one another's expertise and to respond to that. Handing over responsibility for storytelling is a very difficult thing to do. I've been working for the SS Great Britain Trust for 20 years. I really feel I know it. And I feel a lot of ownership of our story. But I also recognise that I'm not the only person who can tell that story. It's a difficult thing to hand over something that you feel so invested in to other creatives. But this project has been our first really substantial attempt to do that. And that's really borne fruit for our audiences. So it is something that we will be looking to do again. I'm going to hand over now to Saili again to perform the poem that he created for Iron Island through those conversations, through that process of collaboration, and give you a little bit of a glimpse into the kind of world that we all occupied for 6 months last year. And I hope you enjoy it.
Context, there was more going on around the voice than right now. But we're in this together. The scene is we're aboard the SS Great Britain. It's the first voyage that we're on together. Just pushed off, and we still have sight of the harbor. We are a rabble of dreamers, waving at the harbor as friends and family blur into confetti. They watch us disappear from all the familiar spaces, leaving silence in our place. From here on out, we'll be absent from community gatherings, family reunions and evening meals. We're joining a community aboard an iron island, carrying promises we made on borrowed courage. With no knowledge of the sea, we confront the water, floating the full length of the globe to make a difference. By virtue of hazard and hope, we float past what was once possible to explore the road less traveled. Remember to carry a compass when you're facing the unknown. A strong tide can break your bearings, and where you come from can feel like a distant constellation. Miles away from home, a stampede is brewing around us, and the iron hull is nodding in agreement. There is no better teacher of perseverance and patience than water exercising its right to be riot and the roaring voice of power and potential. Masts gamble with the wind. Waves crease against the hull, and the ocean make faces at the sky as the captain and crew search for the symmetry in the chaos. Our iron island of iron wrestles the elements with a resonance only a seasoned sailor can follow. All we can taste is salt. All we can hear is whipping in the wind. All we can do is wait to find that comfort. Hand on sail, on rudder, on prayer book, where do we find that comfort? But as the ocean clears and the clotted sky clears, we float into the ice fields amongst the giants, where everything we are shimmers in the wake of a hurricane. Our iron island floats out to where the albatross live, where the water holds its independence, where the great cartographers of time and legacy lean into the future. We are a rolling archipelago drifting across the sea, asking that perennial question, what would you sacrifice today for a better tomorrow? Thank you.
Thank you so much, all three of you, especially Saili. You just gave me goosebumps, which in Kensington Olympia, that's an achievement. Thank you. Any questions from anyone for the team? And I'll come to you with the mic. Brilliant.
Hi, thank you for that presentation. It was really interesting. I just wondered how structured the narrative was. Like, were people meant to have a very guided experience through it, or could they sort of float around and experience things at their own pace, in their own order?
We thought a lot about structure, and as Saili has said, the central metaphor for the experience was a journey. In the end, we decided that the narrative for the experience needed to come from the poet. And from that point, we worked towards presenting this experience as a kind of drama in 3 acts. So the narrative, the visual content, and the sound were all designed in a way to create a clear 3-act structure that took the audience on an emotional journey from leaving home to coming through a storm to coming out the other side and thinking about their lives in a new way. So yes, structure was important.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yes.
Thank you so much. That was brilliant. It looks like a really inspiring project. And I was really interested by your collaborative process. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about that. So you talked about moving away from a brief kind of, the brief kind of way of working with creatives how and when did you bring in your collaborators into the process, and did you work collectively to form the narrative, or what came first? Was there what were your milestones in that process, if you don't mind me asking?
Okay. There was some clear intention in this process, and there was quite a lot of making it up as we went along, and lockdown, in, out, in, out. We did have the wonderful opportunity of having to go through quite a lot of challenges together before we got to the point of being able to commit to this specific project. And I think that was a really strong foundation for collaboration. I think what I took, and Thom and Saili can speak about this as well, what I took from that was the importance of letting the project grow rather than defining it very closely too early. So allowing space for a relationship to grow and allowing space for a concept to grow were both special phenomena almost of this project, which were quite different from the kind of more often project-driven or funding constraint-driven approaches that we might have used in other contexts. Have you two?
Hello. I think the collaborative process for us was amazing. Kate and the SS Great Britain just gave us so much freedom, which is quite rare, and trusted us, maybe because we had done stuff in Bristol and you're aware of our work, but I think it's quite rare to be given that freedom and to not... sometimes it can be a bit of a challenge if people have ideas and they want those ideas put into the show, and that wasn't the case, and Kate was very involved, as were the SS Great Britain team in general, but their involvement was always really valuable, really supported and improved the process. And obviously Saili, the way that we worked with Saili was very collaborative as well. We came up with a bit of a structure that was based on this journey, which was the departure, the storm, which was the obstacle, and then the arrival, which is kind of in the ice field or coming out of the ice field. And we felt we didn't want to kind of arrive on land. I think it was partly a nod to kind of environmental issues as well, and that idea of not really knowing what the future is or what is on the horizon. But yeah, the collaborative process was amazing, and yeah, thank SS Great Britain for all of that freedom, and yeah, it was really valuable.
Yeah, for me, I love the freedom, like Thom mentioned. It was the checkpoints were conversations. Our vision is still lining up? So I didn't really have somebody over my shoulder, because if you gave me the constraints, and if I ever feel like I'm being reined in, I feel like it affects my creativity. Whereas if I have the room to do this, and then as we have conversations, I say, okay, that's where I can draw it down. So we're organically narrowing the field to our brief, so that we can still get done what we're hoping to get done. And that freedom and that trust amongst all of us was a difference maker. And that's my favorite way to collaborate.
Thank you so much. That almost feels like a lovely positive note to end on, but we have got one more minute. If there are any sort of really quick, I don't know, practical questions or burning things coming through. No, thank you all so much. It was absolutely fascinating, really insightful. Thank you. So.